All right, everybody. Jason Sloan with Furtado Law Solutions, accompanied by Jose Ornelas. How you doing, Jose?
I'm doing great. And you, Jason?
I'm doing good. And our guest today is Nathan Tebedo. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Just enjoying a nice snowy day in Colorado here.
Yeah, what part of Colorado are you in again?
Colorado Springs.
Okay.
It was almost 70 degrees 2 days ago.
Yeah, I'm in Denver, so
It was
I feel you.
gorgeous. I literally played sand volleyball outside on Tuesday afternoon, and today we've got this snow all over the place.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago we had Nick Perret on, and he was talking about that. Like, he's like, I'm in shorts, but tomorrow we're bundling up.
Hey, that's the weather here, man.
Yeah,
That is the weather.
it's true. I mean, we get spoiled sometimes, then other times we've got those ice storms. It doesn't happen very often, but I had a picture from 2015 when I came back from the IRE, and where I used to have my office, there was literally ice going up the entire downspout, like 20 feet high. And it was like, it was retarded. And it was one of the coldest winters I remember, you know? So,
for sure.
yeah, totally. So, I guess we'll get to it. We'll talk about your background and then go through it, and you can talk about, you can give our viewers some tips and everything about their business, and then you can talk about what you guys do also. So
Sure.
So tell us about where you grew up and how you got into roofing and the business and what you do now.
All right. I actually grew up here in Colorado. My great grandparents were here, and then my grandparents, and then my parents, and now so am I. And so I grew up here in the Colorado area, just enjoying kind of the outdoors that are here. I grew up doing a bit of backpacking and mountain climbing and skiing and snowboarding and just all the kind of, when you think about Colorado, I definitely got to grow up doing a good bit of that stuff. So, and then I got into this industry when I was 15 years old. So a lot of guys out there can probably commiserate with that. Picking up stuff on the ground as just a teenager, throwing stuff in the dumpster, and then just over time learning about the different components of the roofing industry from an install perspective. And so I've installed and diagnosed and worked on just about every kind of roof that's out there, including the low slope roofs as well. So I've got experience with, your modified torch down, TPO, and PVC, EPDM. The only thing I didn't do was hot tar and gravel. I did my best to try and avoid dealing with a kettle and the hot tar. I just didn't appeal to me too much.
Yeah.
And then my dad and I started a business in 1999 here in Colorado Springs. We had a contracting company, and we did all types of work. So I got to expand from being on a crew to having my own crew to running multiple crews into running production, and then also started to get into understanding the sales component, excuse me. And then kind of some of the marketing that we did here, and just under overall business management as my dad and I ran our company. So in the course of that time, I ended up needing a software for my company. And so right about then, some of you guys have been around long enough to remember when AccuLynx was brand new. And that's where I met Jim Johnson. And so Jim Johnson was actually my AccuLynx sales rep for my company. And so that's where he and I met, and we just started to build a relationship. And then in a pursuit of learning more about the industry and doing business to business type work, I went to work at AccuLynx Software. I think I could be wrong, but I want to say I was like their number 9th employee, I think there. They're well over that number now. So I worked at AccuLynx for a number of years. And then I left AccuLynx and went on to try a little bit different industry. I went into the security industry. And so I worked for probably around 3 years or so, working in the security industry from the provider standpoint. I worked for companies that built software aimed at security contractors. And so if you think about those people that do home and commercial security systems, we built products for them. And so I still got to deal with contractors, and believe it or not, those guys and what they do at its core really isn't that much different than what I already knew from the construction industry. So there's a lot of similarities in there. And so I got to do that. I got to deal with a lot of Department of Defense contractors. That was an interesting world to be involved in. And then over time, Jim Johnson and I stayed in communication, and I started to figure out that I really enjoyed the consultative concept of business to business. So I really enjoyed when we moved a little bit beyond the concept of just selling them a product or providing a service and started talking about their business, what their business needs were, what their struggles were, where they were strong, where they needed to improve. And I had a little bit of a knack for helping contractors, security contractors, construction contractors work on their business to make it better. And so when I started to figure out that I really loved doing that, I started thinking that consulting and coaching was something I think I might want to get into eventually down the road. And so Jim Johnson over here had started a company called Roof Coach Pro. So some of you that have been around long enough remember the Roof Coach Pro days. But since then, the name of that company is Contractor Coach Pro, as you can see. And eventually he and I kind of got figured out that that was probably the direction I needed to go. And so I came aboard with Jim in January of 2018. And so made my way right back into the construction industry and got to get reacquainted with all my old pals and friends from there. And I've been doing that ever since.
Nice. So give us some gems. We were talking the other day, about, good foundations for businesses and stuff like that. I mean, there's guys that have been in this industry a long time, and no offense, they're not doing it right. I don't know how they're still in business. Like some guys, it's all just volume and all that. So, I mean, what are some core foundations for running your construction business, whether you're brand new or you're having to plug the boat and get it so it's running good again?
Well, a lot of people start a business out of either like desire or necessity. And so when you start your business, everything's very much about necessity. We got to get some jobs sold. We got to have some revenue. We've got to get this plane off the ground. And so they're running and gunning, right? Like putting out fires and building their client list, and they're making sales. Most of these guys that start businesses, they're not bad at selling jobs, and oftentimes they're not bad at producing them either. What happens over time is they start going, man, I've been good enough at this that I'm too busy to do everything now. And so when that starts to happen, then the complications of how to run a business become apparent, because we need to start adding people. And adding people means we need to start paying attention to what our costs are, how much we're charging, where our money is, what we can afford, what we can't afford, our processes, because just bringing somebody into your business doesn't magically make all of your responsibilities go away. As a matter of fact, oftentimes it adds more responsibility as we add people to our business. So it becomes more complicated as we're trying to disperse some of the work that we have on us. And so oftentimes what happens is just doing the work itself is something that a lot of guys are really good at. Selling the jobs, building the jobs, doing a quality job. I know sometimes people can have a tendency to knock on the small contractors a little bit, but I can tell you this: if the owner of that company is present on almost every single job they do, the quality is probably pretty good because they're the ones who know that if a callback comes, it's going right to their phone. But how to duplicate that, maintain that quality while also being able to grow your business and not have to work 100 hours a week because you're doing everything. That's where the skills of actually building and owning a business start to become more and more apparent. It's like, oh man, like I need to hire people, or I need to train people, or I need to understand where my money's going, or a lot of different things start to become more complicated because it's more than just you. Like, if you're a single person living by yourself, life is fairly simple. Just make sure that you're fed and clothed and you're good. Start adding people into that equation and things start to change a little bit. So foundational components of your business oftentimes are the ones that get kicked to the wayside. And the reason is because we keep thinking, well, if I hire somebody, revenue's got to go up. In order to get revenue up, I need to hire salespeople. In order to hire salespeople, I need to be able to train them. And so oftentimes business owners focus a lot on the operational side of building their business. They focus on trying to generate more revenue, more leads. And when that happens, generally these guys will see some growth. But because of the complications of adding people to your business, the fact that we didn't work on some of the foundations starts to become apparent. Kind of like if you're driving your car at 20 miles an hour, she's pretty smooth, pretty strong, pretty good. Once your car's going 100 miles an hour, you start to notice that maybe the engine's wrapping out and maybe your tires are wobbling and things change at that speed. And then you go, man, I probably should have maybe done some stuff to my suspension, or maybe I should have put on a little bit better set of tires for these kinds of speeds. And that foundational stuff starts to become apparent. And if you're thinking like, what does that mean? Generally, I would start with understanding your own leadership. If you're going to bring people into your business, you need to be able to lead them. You need to be able to help them become successful. Because if you bring somebody into your business and they're not successful, they're probably not going to hang around that long. And so we need to help them become excellent at their jobs. We need to help them accomplish their goals. So leadership becomes a real key thing, because managing your job starts to shift from running appointments and writing estimates and dealing with suppliers and vendors to hiring people to do those things. And if you're hiring people to do those things, now all of a sudden writing estimates isn't your job, but the person who you hired to write those estimates, that person is now your job. And having people as your job versus functions as your job is a different animal. So leadership component, understanding the kind of culture that you want to build inside your business becomes a really major thing. Culture's a bit of a catchphrase. Everybody wants to talk about it. And oftentimes we hear it so much that we go, yeah, culture. But I can tell you right now, if you don't go out of business within the first couple of years, the number one thing that's going to cause you to go out of business, in our experiences here, is going to be leadership and culture. So if you survived those initial days, you didn't loot, you kept track of your money well enough, because that's probably the number one reason why a lot of little guys go out of business, is tracking and understanding their money. If you get past that phase into having some people and building the company, leadership and culture are going to be the next couple of things that probably sink your ship.
Well, and even when they're small and they do volume, it's not just about how much money came through. It's still knowing what you made off that money, percentages, your margins, and everything else. I mean, we've seen it, I don't know how many times on Facebook and everything else. Somebody's SVG and their contract of the year, they did 20 million from doing like 100,000 the year before. And then the next year, 2 years later, they're out of business and everything. And it's like, hey, just because your volume was up, you still got to make sure what percentages you're making on these jobs. Like if you do $20 million and you only make 200 grand after you pay everybody, you're not making anything. You might as well just stick with staying small and you work less,
There's a lot of truth to that. I've worked with guys before who had multiple locations. Their company from the outside, revenue and volume wise, looked really good, but at the end of the day, the owner's looking at how much they made versus what they went through to make that, and they go, that's not worth it. I could make that much money with 20% the amount of stress that it took me to get there. And so it also has a major impact on how much you can invest into your company. Like you said, it's really not necessarily about how much you did as far as volume. It's a little bit more about how much you kept.
Exactly.
Because what you keep is what gives you the ability to, first of all, be like, okay, I feel like I actually was rewarded for the effort that I put in, and I can reinvest into my business. I know a guy whose company started at about a 1.5, and over the course of a few years, they were up to, 15 million, 20 million, 25 million. And then that guy started going, I think I might actually take a little money out now and do something for myself. Maybe I'll build a house now. And that guy was at 15, 20 million. So it took, like, that person was reinvesting as much as they possibly could back into their business. But if your bottom line isn't growing and isn't staying healthy, then you don't have that to reinvest into your business.
Exactly. Yeah, we were talking to a contractor yesterday, and we're talking about margins because that's what our business is about. Is like, okay, what do you? And he's like, oh, I make this much, and we're looking at where he's at, and we're like, that's literally impossible based off of where you're at with Xactimate. I'm like, even with O&P, that's only a 16% margin jump. You're still not sitting where. And he's like, oh, well, that's on the jobs that they pay for upgrades. And I go, that's not what I asked. I'm talking about insurance work. I go, because then he got into, well, there's certain people that don't upgrade 3 tabs. I go, that's what I need you to look at. We base everything off of that. I go, so if you were making the correct margin on the front and then people were paying upgrades on top of that, what would that do? So that way, these, however many jobs a year that don't upgrade, you're still making money, not this stupid break even. Because guess what? That's not worth doing those jobs. You don't sign a job and you hope that they upgrade, and if they don't, it's kind of like back in the day. We stopped working with Allstate because they were just, with the MSB stuff, they were not paying what they should. And it was like, it wasn't worth our time. If you're doing work for free, then you might as well just walk away.
I mean, you're not doing anybody any favors.
Exactly.
You're not doing anybody any favors if your company isn't sustainable. And if you're not making enough money, how good is the warranty that you offered your clients when odds of you being in business are pretty slim? If they do need something at some point down the road, you're not around. You're bringing people on into your business. And this is another, like, a component of responsibility. If I'm bringing people into my business and I'm bringing them in and I'm attracting them on this concept of hopes and dreams and how well we're going to do and what we're going to do, as an owner and as a leader, we should consider it our responsibility to build a healthy company so that that person can actually stay. If we don't do that, then everybody loses their job, and that's not what we're after. Mm-hmm. So it's a real knowing your numbers is a huge thing. And there's some basic ways you can start figuring that out. I mean, job costing is not another kind of buzzword, but job costing doesn't have to be this wildly complicated thing. It can be pretty simple. You can seriously, you could YouTube a job costing sheet and watch somebody teach you how to create a job costing sheet. And it could just be a spreadsheet with line items for the items that are needed and the labor that's needed. And then the cost per whatever unit. So cost per square foot, cost per square, cost per linear foot, and put those numbers in there, then start plugging in the quantities to figure out what your actual cost to do a job is. I mean, that analysis is eye-opening for a lot of people. Now, a lot of your retail guys are like, well, duh. I mean, nobody else tells us what to charge.
Exactly.
Retail guys are like, well, we have to figure that out on our own.
Well, and that's kind of what we preach, is not exact, but it's like, hey, the problem is everybody's always out there. You need to get paid for all this stuff. You need, and everything back and forth. And it's like, okay, if you run your insurance job like a retail, you know your numbers, right? And you know your margins you need to be at. If that's, guess what? Yeah, every once in a while, if you're a contractor that's doing everything, okay, you're going to get O&P on some jobs, right? And you're going to get some other stuff. But if you're shooting for 40%, 50%, whatever it is, right? And you hit it, don't get greedy. Like Steve Badger said it, don't kill the golden goose. The thing is these guys don't understand. None of them have been to litigation. So they're like, well, no, and I'm like, if you go to litigation, you got to show your numbers. So that's part of our process, is with the insurance company showing like, hey, do you see where Xactimate is? It's paying 20, after materials and labor, it was at 25%. But what this guy is paying, he's actually at 20%. Okay, how is he going to stay in business? How is he going to service your clients? Number one. Number two, that's not even going to cover, in the area, so we started pulling data for all of Xactimate, every line item. as far as labor goes. So, and we're using that along with the data for where they're at as far as the cost of living. And I showed him just something quick yesterday, and I just showed like, okay, the cost of living is a little bit less where he's at than where others, but he also has another cost that standard contractors don't, and that is he is a franchisee. He's paying royalty fees. And so, but part of that he needs to think we talked about, and we'll go into more. Fortunately, when you're paying that, you have to have all your numbers in place. And he's an ex-accountant, so he knows his numbers. So, but the fact is when you look at all that, you say, okay, are they taking care of the advertising for the royalty? Are you just swapping one price for another? Like, that's what you got to know. Like, if you guys are paying for a franchise and you don't have to do no advertising, guess what? That's something you don't deal with, and you're getting jobs. So, I don't think obviously when managed repair programs were good, it was a great deal because you're making a little bit less, but you were not doing any advertising. Back in the day in Colorado, there was only 3 contractors that were on that program with State Farm. Those guys were killing it,
I mean, and shout out to Steve Patrick, great guy. And if you're not following Steve over there at Level the Playing Field group on Facebook or have read his book, you should definitely do that. And Steve's mentality, I tend to agree with, especially on that. Don't be greedy. Understand what a healthy profit margin is for your business, and once you hit it, just go. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, if you start pressing. And one of the things that happens is, like, if you start pressing and you start trying to reach for just whatever you think you can get, that's going to do some things to you. Number one, it's going to stretch your cash flow because you're going to find yourself in more battles over more picky and more nuanced things. And it's going to take you longer to get paid. And if you think about it, the amount of time it takes you to get paid, you're basically sitting on a no-doc loan to whoever's holding that money.
Mm-hmm.
So now subtract out the interest rate on a no-doc loan, right? And you'll find you may not have actually made all that much when you press for that. So understanding your numbers is key because it can also help you. It also can help reduce the stress.
Exactly.
It's like, look, I know what this number is. I know what we need to live. I know where we should be at to be healthy. Long as we at least hit that number. You're going to have a few that go over that number. Good for you. You're going to have a few that come under that number. It just happens. But that overall general number is kind of the one that you're going to want to be aiming at. And when you get it, build it, collect it, move on.
Yeah. And I was, one of the things that, a word picture I came up with yesterday, I was like, okay, think about the guy who's constantly getting an average of 10 yards, right? Playing football, right? You got those guys and they have, obviously most of them aren't average 10 yards, but I just use that as an example. And then you got the other guy who usually gets 1 or 2 yards, and every once in a while he breaks for 50 or 80. His average is still less. So which guy do you want to be? Do you want the guy that's doing good overall? Or do you want to be or do you want to be the guy who's like every once in a while kills it and the rest of the time is, struggling,
What was the, and I didn't see the movie, but I was trying to remember, was it the movie, was it Moneyball? Where they built a baseball team that was
he
just like the numbers. Just
exactly.
Look, if I had a baseball team and every single one of those guys just hit a single, that's a win. That's a win every single time.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's the beauty of statistics, You can always know, like, basically the future when you have, like, the stats and everything.
Well, and that data is important to have and to track. I know that there are a few guys out there that really go into the weeds on the data, and they're probably analyzing data that on a day-to-day basis may not necessarily matter all that much. But I would say the overwhelming majority of guys out there so busy with the day-to-day work that they're not necessarily tracking those numbers. But when you do track those numbers will reveal things to you, and it removes the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of contractors out there that do a ton of different trades. And so when you're doing a lot of different trades and you look at your margins overall, you might go, we're averaging an okay margin. But if you were actually able to track and break those different trades down and then track the numbers individually, you might find out that you're losing money on one of these trades over here every single time. And if that's the case, just eliminating that trade instantly increases your bottom line. Because
Exactly.
you might look at your bottom line and go, well, we're averaging 30%. We're okay. Well, if you're losing between 4 and 5 on this trade every time you do it, just by stopping that trade, your margin just went up by 5%.
Exactly.
So having those numbers in place is really pretty critical.
Well, and honestly, I had a system built out in Job Nimbus, and most of these CRMs out there have it. You can put your job costs in there. You can add your 10%, and you can say, okay, you can do an overall, and then you can do, you can break it down into sections, and it's all done for you. And guess what? You set up the template, and you can have, whether it's a virtual assistant or whatever. I had my virtual assistants doing that. First, I had people here, then I had virtual assistants doing it. And literally, all they're doing is plugging in invoices. It's not that hard. Like, literally, you've put the template together. And most of the time, your Job Nimbuses, your Acculinks, they'll help you put that together. And, I mean, I had a simple template, but sometimes you're on these jobs, and guess what? You had to go get materials a couple more times just because something happened, right? You had some bad shingles or whatever, right? And then you get a rebate later, type of thing. So instead of it being an Eagle View, a permit, labor, and materials, it's like 20 things. Okay, well, sometimes that happens, but, or you ordered skylights for the job and they were custom, and the skylight manufacturer was out 2 weeks, and so the roof was done and you're waiting.
Oh man,
You're still waiting for that.
That's why I like curb skylights, for those type of things.
Definitely having those things, like reducing the amount of material that is needed to do something. And if you're like, man, I could either order a pre-curb prefab skylight, or I've got the material and I can actually build the curb and flash and manage it myself, making the availability of that material easier.
Yeah.
But once again, then you kind of get into that skill level. Like, do you have people to know how to build a cricket or build a curb, and put those things together? It's just so, it can definitely get complicated.
Yeah.
But
I was talking more of like the deck mounts. I hate deck mounts because it's like you're gonna, especially if you're doing a designer shingle, like an Acadia or a Tri-Lam, you got to tear up half the roof to put the stinking thing on. So it's like, I always, when those were, and it was a deck mount, I always was like, okay, we're going to do the skylights first, because we're going to have to rip off part of the roof. It's not like just taking care of a few shingles around there, It's a big job to deal with. So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
So, what for the handful of people that don't know, obviously they got a glimpse into what a Contractor Pro does, Coach Pro does. What is your guys' goal as far as helping contractors out, and how do you guys accomplish that?
Well, as far as it pertains to working with contractors, our goal is we really want contractors to have a resource and to stay in business. I was thinking about this earlier this morning about the number of people that are employed by small businesses is huge. It's huge. That's that whole middle class area where we have admins and QA people and project managers, and we have some sales folks, and we have all kinds of people. And so one of the things that we identify is that a lot of guys go out of business, and they're good folks. There were some things they didn't quite understand, and they didn't learn them quick enough. Mm-hmm. And so Contractor Coach Pro is really concerned with wanting companies to stay in business, wanting people to have the resources to achieve their potential, as well as the people who work for them achieving their potential. So that's one of the major drivers for Contractor Coach Pro's desire to impact the industry. We also want people to do it right. I've talked to guys before who explained to me how they do certain things, and I'm going, man, do you know that that's illegal? No, I had what? No, it's not. This is the way I've always. You can't. You like you're living on borrowed time if you continue to do things that way.
Yeah,
Man,
we do
no,
we do the same thing. Like whenever we link up with a new contractor, it's like send us your contract, show us your advertising. Like make sure you guys are not acting like public adjuster, lawyer, going over those rules of UPPA. And so that way, I mean, anybody who's been in the industry for over 5-10 years, you've seen these huge companies and they get slaughtered in court by the insurance companies because they're saying we're insurance experts. So you can say the same exact thing and not be breaking law. I mean, it's kind of stupid that that's the case, but I mean, just say you're storm restoration experts. Guess what? And even you're saying the same thing, and you're not saying
even beyond that too. Like it doesn't always necessarily come down to the legality of how you position yourself in the market and insurance. It could be the way that you deal with your employees.
Yeah, true.
The way that you do, I mean, there's countless numbers of stories out there where because somebody wasn't, because their leadership might have been a little bit faulty, or because they didn't have strong enough processes and systems, or maybe because they weren't aware of certain things, bam, $500,000 in embezzlement.
Yep.
Or they get sued by an employee and they lose in that because they weren't compliant with how to work with and deal with their employees. Or God forbid, somebody gets seriously injured or dies on one of the projects. It is more companies than can count that have suffered some sort of horrible tragedy like that in their business, and a death, which is a horrible, horrible thing to happen, and it ruined the entire company. Everybody's out of a job and the whole thing's gone. So there's so many components that go into making sure that somebody runs a business. And I'm not even, I mean, sure, there's bad actors out there. I know there's bad actors out there, but at the same time, I don't think most contractors are bad actors. The ones that are bad actors get a lot of press, right? They're the ones we see their face plastered on the news in the evening. We see those guys. They're a minority. I believe that 100%. They are a minority of the overall number of contractors. Most contractors are good folks who kind of want to be their own boss and steer their own ship. And Contractor Coach Pro wants to help them do that. And so we do that through a thing we call our Contractor's Blueprint. I don't want to make this a commercial or anything. That's not what I'm all about. But we do that with our Contractor's Blueprint. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to get a taste of kind of what that looks like, we just released Jim's book, The Contractor's Blueprint. It's available on Amazon, and it literally lays out the foundational DNA of a company. So if you're in, I mean, we literally just say, okay, here you go. You can go buy it on Amazon right now. As a matter of fact, it might even be free on Audible for Audible subscribe. No, not Audible. What's the other one? There's the Kindle subscriber. Anyway, but yeah, it's the book is out there and it literally has everything in it, that not everything, but the first half of what we call our Contractor's Blueprint is in that book. You could go buy it and read it. I've read it. It's a really good book, if I do say so myself.
All right. Yeah, I was thinking of one other thing is, like when you were talking about money stuff, one of the other things I've seen trip up businesses is, a lot of the contractors, especially in the roofing community, they're almost everybody that works for them is subcontractors. They're 1099. You can't treat them the same as employees.
So we actually we have one of our champion coaches. Her name is Roslyn, and she is a rock star. Shout out to Roslyn, love her. She is a full-on certified HR professional, so human resource management. And I've had conversations with her because human resources is definitely not my bag of tricks. And so learning some more about those concepts from a legal standpoint, and you're 100% right. And you cannot treat 1099s the same way you do a W-2. And it is so easy to have that exposure happen. You have a 1099 salesperson, and you gave him some shirts, you gave him some business cards, you provided some leads, you required that they went to training, you paid for them to go on some trips, you did reviews with them, you instilled a bunch of standards that would be appropriate for a W-2, but this person's a 1099. You get into some sort of beef with them, and we've all heard it, right? So-and-so that, so-and-so at ABC Roofing Company or whatever owes me 80 grand. It's always 80 grand. I don't know why. It's like, I don't know why that number is like so common, but it's like, it's always $80,000. And they're disgruntled and they're upset about how that relationship ended. And they go walking into your local state employment association or board and file a complaint. And there it is. There's the book.
I found it. Sorry.
There it is. Kindle. It's free on Kindle Unlimited. We our folks out there are so awesome. Like the Contractor Coach Pro Nation, they bought and pre-bought so many books, and I think that's what qualified us to end up on the Kindle Unlimited. So it was super cool. So thank you to all of you guys for that. But yeah, it's a fantastic book, and I'm pretty hard on books. This is not an essay that should have been an essay that got stretched into a book. It's a full-on 300 and some odd page book. So I highly recommend it. It's easy reading, but it's got some depth. And if you want to get a really good foundation and understanding to the foundation of your business and the DNA and how you can choose the DNA of your company, unlike we can't choose our own DNA, I would definitely read that book. But going back to the 1099 W-2 thing, in talking with Rosalind, she says, there is no gray line. There's no gray line in between what you can and can't do. She says, now most guys are not 100% compliant, especially if they're running 1099. And so, they tend to kind of be like, well, I mean, I'm mostly fine. And I like to liken that to the speed limit. If the speed limit's 35 miles an hour, 36 is breaking the speed limit. There's no question. It says 35, you go 36, you're breaking the speed limit. Right now, a lot of us drive 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. And because we're looking at an exposure or risk to reward, at the end of the day, going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit probably doesn't have much reward in it. It might save a few fractions of a second. But the point being that there is no gray zone for this W-2 1099 conversation. You either are compliant or you're not. And all it takes is one upset person who you had a 1099 contract with, and your labor board from the state is going to come in and they're going to audit everyone. And they're not going to be like, oh, well, this person's a 1099, but this person with the same position is a W-2. They're, from everything I've ever seen in my experience, they're just going to treat everybody like they're a W-2, and the IRS is going to love that.
Yep, exactly. Yep, I've seen it before. I haven't experienced it, fortunately, but I have seen it before, and it's not fun. You
got to be tight on that stuff. And at the end of the day, whether or not you go 1099 or W-2 is actually less of a financial decision and more of a cultural one. What you want your company to look like and who you want to be is going to be the guiding principle typically that decides whether or not you have all W-2 or some W-2 and 1099. That is who do we want to be and how do we want to function and operate is really decided by your culture. And a lot of guys think it's a financial thing. But we've got another champion coach, Jenny. She is about as, I don't know if there's anybody better in our industry, brag, at finance and accounting strategy and management than Jenny. And she can literally sits down with some of our contractors and starts working over the numbers, what it costs for them to manage that employment side of things for their people versus their people doing all of that management stuff on their own. And generally speaking, those two things oftentimes are a wash. And so there's a way to skin that cat.
Yeah, and the thing is there's plenty of businesses out there that have employees that are commission only. Look at the
that's
right. They're like
yeah.
it's minimum wage plus, but the commission, it's an override, So it's like, okay, well, you sell 10 cars this month and you made 10 grand, you're not getting your minimum wage. It's it's not cost plus, it's one or the other, whatever is the highest,
Right. And yeah, I am not Rosalind, so I'm not an HR professional. And, whatever that fast talking, like legal, all opinions and views expressed by Nathan are not the sole and legal opinion based of Contractor Coach Pro. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an HR professional. So it can vary from state to state on the laws and what your compliance looks like. So just be aware of that. You should have somebody who's an expert in your area to help advise you on how those things work. But for the most part, you're right. Employees can be 100% commission. And even with them being 100% commission, in many cases, you're fully capable of offering them retirement packages and healthcare and, trucks and gas cards and, uniforms and all that kind of stuff is fully capable even with a commission only type employee.
Exactly.
Yes, and sometimes it's better to have sometimes insurance on the severance package and everything. I think it's better sometimes.
Severance is more of a Mexico thing, Jose. Here we have I was talking about that there. Like, if you have an employee after they're established, after a certain amount of months, if they start screwing up and you talk to them and it doesn't happen, if you fire them without, there's no, like in the US, you can show, hey, I did this, this, and this. I'm not paying unemployment. You're paying them 3 months worth, regardless.
What are you angling for there, Jose? What are you?
Oh no!
Just exploring my options.
Exploring my options, because there is some companies in Mexico that they do not offer like severance. They force you to sign like that you are like going by yourself.
Yeah, the ins and the outs of severance and right to work states, and yeah, if you got a lot of deep questions about that,
yeah, that's another.
I'll pass you off to Rosalind and let her.
That's other
thing. Yeah. I actually had a guy, a rep with one of the suppliers, and he started having issues, and so he went to work somewhere else. But his contract was through Florida, and they don't play games. And the other supplier was like, "Sorry, man, we had our lawyers look at it. We want you to work for us because you're awesome." And
they were enforcing.
He had a lot of good points. Like, they hadn't paid him his commissions. He switched from inside to outside, and he was owed a lot of money. And so he did have some good grievances, but I'm like, you should have just got a lawyer about that then, But all right, well, so let's see. If you want to get a hold of Nathan, or just the coaching staff, you can go to contractorcoachpro.com. If you want to get a hold of him direct, you can email him at coach@contractorcoachpro.com. And then what other, you guys have Facebook, and what else are you guys on?
Yeah, we're not hard to find. So I mentioned earlier, we have a podcast called Contractor Radio. It's a great podcast. And I'm not just trying to sound full of us selves here. We get a lot of really good feedback on the information that we put out on Contractor Radio. So you can find Contractor Radio on any podcast platform that you happen to like. We also have a YouTube channel. There's some really great stuff on there. We do have, you can find myself or Jim or John or any of my coaches on LinkedIn. We're also on Facebook and a Contractor Coach Pro group we have a Contractor Coach Pro Facebook page. We also have a group on Facebook called, we just changed it. Contractor Community, Leadership, Growth, and Freedom for Contractors. And so that's our Facebook group. Jump in there and request some access. And you can find us at any one of those places. We got all kinds of really cool stuff that we do. If you're out there and if you're in the Dallas area, we're about to run our Top Rep sales event in Dallas on the 27th and 28th, I believe, of this month. If you're in the Denver area like us, we're actually doing another Top Rep event in April. And the dates on that one, if you're interested, I'll go make sure that I'm saying this correctly to the world. April 11th and 12th is our Top Rep event in the Denver area. So you can find all your information about us at Contractor Coach Pro or at topreptraining.com, whatever you're looking for. And then, like you said, my email is pretty easy. It's just coach@contractorcoachpro.com.
Nice. All right. Well, if anybody needs help with their supplements or estimates, whether it's 1 or 1 million, you can contact us. This is one of the things we clarify. We have an open-ended contract. Some of these guys are like, oh, I don't want to. I'm like, they can't make you sign a 1-year contract for something like this. Like, that's retarded. I go, you should never do business with somebody you can't try out. So if you're having some issues or you just need some overflow, you can contact us at 720-702-1938. That's direct to me, call or text, or Jason at furtadolaw.solutions. Thanks again, Nathan, and we look forward to linking up again soon.
Hey, thank you. I enjoyed this. Thanks for having me on.
We should have your gal with the HR stuff. We should do an HR one. That would be great.
I can definitely make sure that that happens.
All right. Awesome. See you later.
Nathan. See you later, Nathan.